Hello, hello.
Yeah. So we have with us Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta and
Yes.
Miss Apurva Bose Datta. I would like to invite Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta to give his brief introduction. I would like to invite him. And Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta has professional and academic experience spanning over 51 years in architecture, urban planning, architectural education, policy planning, and planning legislation. He's founder, director, COA Bhadal, and past advisor, town planning, Punjab Urban Development Authority. He's a former vice president of Indian Institute of Architects, and he's a writer of numerous academic and professional. He's a winner of numerous academic and professional awards, including Vishwakarma Award and Lifetime Achievement Award in 2020. He's a guest lecturer in many countries. He's also a team leader of World Bank Project CADS Gujarat and has authored over 300 technical papers and 6 ebooks on different subjects. So, Mr. Jeet Kumar Gupta has recently launched ebooks. The first one I'll talk about is Making and Unmaking of Chandigarh City of Two Plans. It talks about the valuable contribution made by the first team in the planning and designing of the city. And the second book he's written is Housing for All in Urban India Myths and Realities. This book is an attempt to look at the entire housing sector, both objectively and holistically. And the book tries to look in detail problems of slums in large cities besides issues creating roadblocks in making addition to housing stock. So we'll go over to Mr. Gupta's for you, sir. There are many books written about Chandigarh, talking about the urban planning and about Lee Corbusier's architecture, etc. So, what new dimension have you added in the book? So, over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you, Deepika, for the opportunity. I'm sorry and my apologies for delaying the program to the extent of even half an hour. I was not able to check in. But thank you very much and making me part of the great journey where we are looking at the books. But I'm not an academician by neither by profession nor by avocation because I've always been in the government. After doing my graduation, I went to planning. After finishing my 35-year in government, I came back to the architecture. I started learning architecture, and that as a first as a principal because they could not find a principal. Somebody recommended my name, and then I was for 8 years with that academics. Anyhow, I was connected with CCA for a long time. Apurva has been my student, and she knows how bad I was, while teaching, because I was never academician by any career or choice. It was just for heck of this. Deepika, can I take 15-20 minutes to have my PPT, which
Yeah,
I can
of
display, or what?
course, of course, of course. We
I
would
like
all
to
like to, yes, we would all
I
like
like
to
to
look at.
brief. I'll share screen, and I'll go back to what
Definitely.
city is. So can you see my screen? Is it visible?
Yeah, it is visible.
Is available. Thank you. So I think we look at the city that's making of Chandigarh a city of two plans. Because most of the people, I thought this book is not written as a text. But this book is a compilation of my various articles which I've written on these cities from time to time. And this touches about planning, it touches about the neighborhood concept, it looks at periphery, it looks at the development controls, it looks at housing, the experimentation which was done, art and architecture in the city, and then, Chandigarh as a smart city. These were a few stray thoughts, which were penned from time to time. And then during this COVID time, when I thought, those could be combined and brought out as a just a compilation of those articles. So this is not a the regular kind of books, So I think we go back, we should understand Chandigarh. Yeah, it was not authored by Lee Corbusier. We should, I think, understand there are two plans which have gone into finally drawing what Chandigarh is. This is on the left-hand side. It's Albert Meyer plan, first plan there by the team which was hired to do the planning of Chandigarh. The second was the what has been executed by Lee Corbusier, So first question was, how Chandigarh came in because of 1947 partition. Punjab lost its capital Lahore. It went to Pakistan. So therefore, government was without any permanent seat. They were shuttling between Jalandhar and Shimla and the winter and summer capital, and ultimately thought of, let's have a permanent seat. So the question of whether it should be this, the capital city should be extension of existing city or it should be, new city. So ultimately, there was a lot of conflict. There are a lot of consideration. Then security, centrality, and other issue. They came to the conclusion in the wisdom of the political masters that we will have a new cities. So ultimately, they constituted a committee with the help of Government of India. They zeroed on the present site, and this site, is known for its distinct advantages in terms of centrality, proximity to national capital. There was sufficient resources, and this, site was free. Had two seasonal chow on the east and west, and north was the Shivalik range of hills. So there could not be a better site, which could be found for a capital city. Let me also clarify, the credit for selecting the site is not with any foreigner, Nobody was involved. They were all Indian, and the credit goes to this. And I can say, the success of city lies 50% upon the selection of appropriate site. If you don't select the appropriate site, you're always in trouble. But this is wonderful site, which has been selected. So the brief was given and brief was prepared by the PWD and there was no planner involved at that time. And they set their own agenda and goals, for population in terms of infrastructure. And it was thought of, that city will have a population of 500,000. And Chandigarh was thought to be one of the example in the new India, that independent India, that this city will have the best of infrastructure and services, where every person, poorest of the poor, will have basic amenity of water supply, drainage, electricity, and it will be available to all, irrespective of the position. And this remains the only city till now which is providing water supply, sewerage, electricity, that too pipe water supply. I'm talking, and the sanitation system, waterborne when sanitation system. I'm talking of 48. That was the vision at that time, because the city was supposed to be a role model for the nation in the future planning and architecture to come in, and the new cities to come in, and for the guiding the urbanization in the country, So despite the fact the city was a state capital, but it was being looked at the laying the footprints and agenda for the future growth and development of the nation, So the first master plan, people hired, because they said there is nobody in India who can take up this onus, and they thought, let's hire people from outside. So Albert Meyer, who was working, he was American. He was working in American Army, worked in India, posted in India. He was first hired. So when he was hired, he brought in Matthew Nowitzki also. He considered a number of people, and then he came with the leaf-shaped plan as part of the American culture, that they don't believe in state line. And the basic unit was the super block, 500 meter by 1,000 meter. So Albert Meyer defined the master plan, defined the position of the capital complex, the position of the city center, university, and the industrial area, and also detailed out the master plan in terms of services. Then did the detailed of the sector planning, the super block they were calling it, detailed the part of the capital complex. So they did a lot of works, for 1.5 to 2 years, But unfortunately, Matthew Nowitzki, who was the key man working with Elliot Meyer, he was blessed with the son, went to Paris to meet, went to Tokyo to meet his wife, And when he was returning, the plane crashed and he died, unfortunately. But Albert Meyer said, I have done my job, we have prepared a master plan, we have done detailing everything, it is now to be implemented. So I think government, he said, I alone cannot do this job because Matthew Nowitzki was the key man. So he said, here are the plans, here is the master plan, here are the, detailing we have done. Now please implement and have their own people. But the government was very clear, the city has not taken off. So they wanted somebody, who from for internationally known person who could guide and take the city forward and make it a distinct reality. So Corbusier was hired, So Corbusier came in, and this is the team which Corbusier himself portrayed, It's a Maxwell Fry and Jane B. Drew, husband-wife, the architects who were working in London, and then Perry Genre and the cousin of Lee Corbusier, who were partners, This is a painting which done by Lee Corbusier himself. And he says, this is the team which has made the Chandigarh. And this, painting is clearly depicted on the gateway to the door of the assembly, where you can see full panel dedicated to this. So Corbusier, says this is the team, Corbusier was basically given the task of implementing the master plan, designing the capital complex, and guiding the future growth and development of the city. Corbusier knew, he is not here for all the time. He was here for only a contract for 2 months in a year. So he brought in his cousin, Perry Genre, who did all the work. And he was here for 14 long years as a chief architect and the, key man who made this city possible. In fact, the credit for the city as a reality in the present form goes to this gentleman, Perry Genre, who is not properly acknowledged. Corbusier was given the task of implementing the master plan, but Corbusier was Corbusier. He signed the agreement contract with the government, but ultimately when Jane B. Drew and Maxwell Fry asked, what are you going to do? He said, let me sign the contract and then I'll see what I do, And then he said he was he had done a lot of work. He had never had the opportunity to design a city or implement a city. And this was the first opportunity which was coming. So ultimately he was trying to display all his, work, learning, expertise, knowledge on the Chandigarh, which he has gathered over a period of 40 and 50 years of his working. And Chandigarh, he said, a four-pronged job of a human being, that's a living, working care of body and spirit, and the travel, if these four functions of a human being can be put in a proper rational manner, and the city is planned under nature, with sun, space, greenery as the, guiding factor, I think city will be a, fine city. So Corbusier, looked at the master plan prepared by Nowitzki, but he was, he hated curves, and he believed in straight lines, So he changed the shape and size of the city, but he did not change the city center, university, and industrial area. He slightly changed the capital complex, This Albert Meyer wanted the Sukhna Chau to be flowing as part of the capital complex, so that this capital complex was integrated with the Sukhna Chau itself with water flowing in. But Corbusier, shifted it to the west and made it clear. Sukhna Chau was made clear, and that's where the lake had started. Lake had come in. So if the, Albert Meyer would have been there, there would never been a lake here. So lake was artificially created, which Corbusier thought, which will modulate every this groundwater recharging, modulate the temperature, and will reflect the glory of the capital complex. So ultimately, he came out with his own idea, the city to be developed in 3 stages. Number one, stage one was 9,000 acres, for 15,000, 150,000 people, because they were not sure the city could ever have a population of 5 lakh. So city was divided into 3 stages. They say we only will plan for 150,000. If for bids, the city achieve that population, then we'll take up the second stage, So first stage was low density with only 150,000 people accommodated in 9,000 acre. And stage two was a high density, That's 6,000 acre accommodating 3.5 lakh people, You can see, if there are any problems in the city in terms of the quality of life, in terms of density, in terms of, overcrowding in stage two, it is all not unintended. It was part of the planning process itself. Kabuzir said, God forbids, if the city achieves a population of 5 lakhs and the city further grows, then where do we go? He never, suggested that city should be expanded. He said city should be a finite city. It must be contained wherein it is, in the 15,000 acre. He says additional population will be accommodated in stage one, That was stage three, redensification of stage one. And Kabuzir, in 64 writes a letter to the government. Now the stage has come, where you should think of stage three. But that letter was never answered by the government. And therefore, that has not been achieved, So city became a mosaic of density increasing from north to south, and also quality of life. Kabuzir wanted more openness toward the capital complex, And he said, since it's a gently sloping side, so better would be the more density should be at the tail end. So Kabuzir, Jane B. Drew explained its master plan as in the human analogy. And he says the best creation of the God is basically the human beings. So he said the capital remains the head, city center remains the heart, hand of productive industrial area, hand of learning is the university, and then the parkways are where you have brain and intellectual elements placed in shape of museum and library. And he considered roads as the artery to carries the blood in the shape of traffic, and glass and bricks was termed as a skin. So this was the first master plan which was prepared, and you can see, the area was reduced because there are a lot of agitation going on. People say there are no sector 13, but in the original plan, this was sector 13, which was ultimately, merged to create the university and the PGI, and that has come in. There was sector 13, which is really numbered, but this is what Kabuzir prepared the plan for the citizen as a whole. So this is the cities, how the city is conceived as an extension of the nature, and city was, trying to connect every individual and every part as under the shadow of, the chivalric range of hills. The basic unit of city planning was the sector, and the sector was 800 meter by 1200 meters, with people 5,000 to 25,000. It was supposed to be self-contained, self-sufficient, safe from traffic. It was planned on introvert, character, but it was surrounded with fast traffic arteries, and there was one entry allowed from all the four sides. Road network was rule of 7 V's, which he evolved as a part of the Siam study, and this is what Kabuzir put it V7, but he added V8 VC to take care of the bicycle and the two-wheelers, which he never wanted to mix with the four-wheeler. These are the roundabout, which are basically showing the kind of greenery and the kind of quality of spaces created within the city, even as in the roundabout on the traffic and this transportation. Housing, there were 13 category of government housing from 1 to 13, one for chief minister and 13 for PMs, and there was 14 category added for the people, for the poor people, It was basically with different variation. Areas were given. Every cost was already fixed in during the time of Albert Meyer. So Kabuzir had to do it. So the Chandigarh architecture was a preconceived architecture. It was the outcome of economy, technology, and the climate, and the material which were locally available, because they were given very, very tight schedule for, money, and also the spaces to be achieved was great, So therefore, if you find Chandigarh very small opening with little windows and little woodwork, it was because woodwork was 7 times more costly and the glass was 11 times more costly than the bricks. So therefore, they used brick for all the things, and they did a lot of experimentation to make it this, but they never compromised on the quality of architecture, and they gave a new and distinct architecture based on local material, local technology. Still, give spaces in the designing of the building, even in interior and exterior. Working was basically defined the capital complex, which comprise of this on the left hand side, this vertical, this is the secretariat. Then number 2 is the assembly, number 3 is the high court. Number, there was supposed to be, this is unfortunately incomplete, because the governor palace, which was scheduled to be there, was not constructed because that governor, at that time, the governor Narhari Vishnu Godgil refused. He said, I don't want to have this palatial kind of things. So that shifted to the circuit house that time was there. So ultimately, that was converted into Museum of Knowledge, which is unfortunately yet to be constructed. So this remains incomplete. But there are number of monuments considering the spaces which are there. So there are basically monuments which have been constructed, which of which open hand and the Material Memorial, then a Tower of Shadow, Geometric Hill, they are there, which are punctuating this, but it remains a pedestrian paradise. So you can see these buildings. The first building, 50-story building and high-rise building would have been in Chandigarh, and reconstructed right in 55. But government said we don't have money, we don't have technology, we don't have material which was to be imported. So Corbusier were requested to scale down, and that's what it came. This is the highest building. This is 10-story building. This is secretariat, here which have a terrace garden, which are rooftop restaurant, etc. And you can see how simply this is the assembly where you have upper house and lower house. Lower house is a hyperbolic paraboloid. Corbusier was basically inspired by the cooling tower of Ahmedabad, thermal plant, where he was working and he was flying, and where he saw, and he adopted this form. Corbusier was very much, enamored. He was very much, he liked the bull's horn because of the power they had. So ultimately, what he did, every building he created, ultimately he wanted to create the bull's horn, and that's what this hyperbolic cooling tower is chamfered, and that's what he put in assembly. That's what he. This is the interior of the assembly, which is most wonderful thing Corbusier ever created. This is high court, where Corbusier puts the same kind of that bull's horn, but this is a wonderful design, where he uses the two roofs for cooling and having ventilation going between the two roofs to keep it to cool. This is where Corbusier has been, Corbusier made art integral part of the designing of the courts for acoustic as well as to make these dull spaces both lively. In fact, Corbusier, initially the Chief Justice of Punjab got this 3 pillars painted white. So when Corbusier came, the building was to be inaugurated. He said, nothing doing, I'm not going to not allow this inauguration. He says, how this could be painted white? The Chief Justice said, because purity, we are talking of purity, and that's what they are white. He says, nothing doing, has to change. So ultimately, he he created this color scheme, gave it to the PWD, which took 6 months to arrange money, and this was painted. So Corbusier had their own, focus and the idea. And you can see, had it been a white, what would have been the urban scenario or the this facade of the High Court would have been. So this is Tower of Shadow, which tells you how the sun moves and how you manage the sun in the Chandigarh itself. The Open Hand Museum, he was inspired from Gandhiji. which is open to receive and open to give. This is one of the monument, and Corbusier clearly said that beyond Capitol Complex, north of Capitol Complex, nothing should come. This is his, Sector 17 city center, which is still, which is to a lot of extent is being built, but there is still a building which is 11-story high building right in the center, which is shown in the chalk in a different color like industries, which is not yet constructed because they are now finding it difficult because earlier already there is a problem of traffic and transportation, and putting 11-story high building which would be landmark of the city center, then they are thinking, what will be the traffic problem and transportation problem, and that's what the building has not yet been constructed, and that's where, four bazaars meet in the concept of bazaar, and this is the focal point which Corbusier wanted. So this is the piazza, central piazza. These are the elements which are introduced in the city, city center. This remains a pedestrian thing, but it has its own issues and problem. And this is the master plan which Corbusier ultimately prepared. This is the my plan which has been implemented. Third comes the care of body and spirit, and it was made sure that cities shall have best of infrastructure in terms of education, culture, and recreation, and even sports and knowledge. So healthcare and other institutions were all created. So all this Joe which was created, meandering through 100 to 300 meters, 6 meters down, this was not tempered but developed as the Leisure Valley, which goes end from one end to another. So Corbusier also gave the gift of Sukhna Chau because he shifted the Capitol Complex. It's a man-made water feature, 3 kilometers long. Band was created and 14-meter earthen dam was created, where still no vehicle is permitted. It's a pedestrian paradise. You can see the lake where this is the lake club he created. Museum Chandigarh. Corbusier prepared the design for museum, in Tokyo and Ahmedabad. This is the latest one, and this is one of the best museum. This is the Student Center. Punjab University is known for its architecture, known for its glorious buildings, and for campus design. This is Student Center. This is the Gandhi Bhavan, one of the finest building you can ever think of, and it's a lotus which is on the water, which is created by Piri Janre, and this building, though very small, but one of the finest building in the architectural vocabulary of the Chandigarh. This is Corbusier's own. Corbusier wanted that Chandigarh should become a lab for architecture, and he brought two institutions, College of Fine Arts and College of Architecture, and all this design has been prepared by him itself, which was executed. And the College of Arts is in Sector 11, and this is in Sector 12, and they are basically now providing nursery for architects across this, So landscaping was another feature which was totally conceived as part of the planning process, where where buildings were married with trees and man was linked with nature, and there was precise kind of schemes prepared in terms of textures, etc., so that you can define the area where you are moving, because of the plantation done. So this is Leisure Valley. There were different kind of controls which were made applicable to the city, and this was within the city and outside the city. In every building under the Chandigarh remains a under control. So there are different kind of control, zoning control, architectural control, even the gates boundary wall and the advertisement control was there. Tree preservation order was installed in order to protect all the trees, and that's what you see. Chandigarh never lost the tree cover which it inherited at the time of acquisition. City outside the city was a periphery which was to protect the surrounding, no haphazard development to come in, and also for providing 6,000 acres of land which was required for expansion of the city when they wanted from 150,000 to 500,000. So but meanwhile, this Western Command had come in, and also the HMT factory had come in. So this was, extended from 8 kilometer to 16 kilometer, and this was largely, Periphery Control Act, largely responsible for, maintaining the sanctity of the city and creating a possible. The amount of work done, you can see, even the sewer manhole was designed. The amount of work which has been done in Chandigarh by the capital project, it looks enormous and it is unique, So Corbusier, for this city, gave an edict, He said, we will be gone. What will happen to the city in future? So he gave a, edict where he writes down the principle which has, he wanted the people to know, the future citizen to know, what is the basic concept adopted for planning, what are the basically the basic ideas which have been used in the governing of this, and there are sanctity of certain principle which should not be violated, and that's what he tries to define, that let people become the guardian of this. So he tells cities designed on a human scale. He defines the sector, road vocabulary, then he tells you area of special architecture, then character of Madhya Marg, and then he talks about the city center, industrial area, the lake, landscaping, and then he said there will be no personal statute, and then he calls for the building material truthfulness needs to be maintained. And he said, seed of Chandigarh is well sown. It is for the citizenry that flourishes. But this Chandigarh remained a designed city, not a planned city, because the master plan of the city was prepared in 1906 hours by the Corbusier. So city which were thought to be never exceeding a population of 150,000 has crossed now a million, So ultimately, the Chandigarh has grown in population, in density, in terms of, haphazard and unplanned growth, in terms of large slums coming in this. So it is facing that kind of problem which normally the cities are there. There's a problem of traffic and transportation. There are problem of slums, You can see, this is that was a residential slum. This is a commercial slums. These are the villages which have been not acquired. In first phase, all villages were acquired, They were, Corbusier said villages should be integrated as part of this, but they should not be allowed to be speculated. But in phase two, villages have been allowed to be there, and they are creating mess for all kind of things because they don't have a control. After the reorganization, 1966, because city remained, this Chandigarh periphery was divided, 1440 square kilometer of periphery. Punjab got 75%, Haryana got 22%, and Chandigarh was left only with 3% of the periphery. So periphery, which was supposed to be protected, had emerged as the major threat, But Chandigarh remains one of the most valuable city of its contribution because, it is clearly demonstrated how the planned development can be achieved, how highest kind of infrastructure can be provided. Chandigarh serves still a role model of planning and architecture in the country. They established standard even for the poorest of the poor that they must have accommodation of 2 rooms, and they did all the experimentation in terms of planning and architecture, But the message from Chandigarh remains that the first theme is very, very critical, Political support is very, very important. Bulk acquisition of land is very important. Working with nature, preserving flora and fauna, designing building with climate, culture, orientation, and sun remains very, very important. Bureaucratic model for city management proved its efficacy in Chandigarh. Roads are not named after an individual. No statue is permitted, and they are only, commemorated through a plates, and traffic roundabouts create a unique, this framework for the city. So ultimately, the system of development control, the concept of periphery and city having an edict remains one of the wonderful contribution of Chandigarh, So this is city is basically, he says, this is the insignia, this is the, mascot of Chandigarh. open hand, open to receive and open to give, so that the city grows not in a vacuum, but in the whole lot of infinite, unlimited richness, intellectual and material, and make use of this to remain one of the wonderful experiment. So I am sorry I took the time, but I would this is what I have to communicate about the city. So there I close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. That was wonderful. There, it was a good revision, plus so many things which one doesn't know, which you have brought to the forefront. So, would you like to talk about the other book as well, or?
In fact, this book, basically, I'm not saying it's a compendium of Chandigarh. I wanted people should know the history. People should know there were two plans. What were, there were difference in two plans, and what would have been had the first plan been implemented. There are both positivity and negativities in those plans. That's what I wanted people to connect. Secondly, Chandigarh has done a lot of research in economy, efficiency, architecture, etc. in terms of material, which I wish people should know. How the art and art has been leveraged by Corbusier, and in making this areas beautiful, interiors, etc. That I think wanted people should that needs to be communicated. So the whole lot of things were there. That's what this book was. Those article was compiled and brought in. The book on housing basically try to make the gamut of what goes into making housing, because housing remains one of the most important thing. It's determinant of quality of life. In fact, no city can be more livable unless they have provide the housing. And the UNO even says the housing should be taken as a basic right of human right, because the quality of life, the security, safety, and the identity of the human beings is largely determined by the kind of housing they have. And we have seen, in the recent pandemic, the COVID-19, how these cities have been, behaving, that they did not own the people who were there serving, because they did not have the accommodation and they have no other means otherwise to run back and leave the city in whatever the in condition they had. We could see those distressing condition. So therefore, this entire gamut, this book was trying to look at various issues. Unfortunately, one sector, that is housing, is never static. It's always evolving, devolving, changing. And this is always a demand, which is chasing the supply. There's always a shortage. You can't think of, that you provide so much housing and you will be sufficient. Housing remains one of the most difficult tasks, and I think that needs to be looked in. But we were looking at, the various aspects in terms of land, their issues, in terms of technology, in terms of architectural design, in terms of material, in terms of construction technology, and the challenges remain, the uh, they remain formidable. I think we have to change our approach to the housing. It's not the you create. You don't go for ownership of the city. You accept the right to housing, but please do not accept the right to ownership of this city, this building, housing, because you are not creating owner. The moment ownership is passed, the housing gets sold off, because it's a question of life and livelihood. So there are priority, and once we have 25% people living below poverty line, what you can think of giving them ownership, and that doesn't help, because they have other priority. And secondly, we have to look the affordability in terms of not in terms of not only we have to take affordability in the lifelong, the life cycle. Not only when you make a house, you make it cheaper, but house has a life of 50 to 60 years. It has 90% of the cost of the operation goes into your electricity and water supply bill, and what will happen, in maintenance and repair. So that's what we were trying that if those houses looked at, it should not be looked at the initial cost, it should be, the life cycle cost of this. So there were a number of issues which were there. Land, there, slums we were looking at in terms of material and technology. And ultimately, we have to change, we have to at option, because there is not one method which should guide that you can provide housing to all. There have to be multiple options. You don't have to create 2-bedroom house for everybody. There are different kinds. You need housing for the people who come and stay. For a rickshaw wala, you don't need a 2-room house. So there are rental housing, there are mobile housing. So there are a whole mix of things which will have to be created. So ultimately, we have to look at that where our urbanization is going, and will we be able to provide that amount of housing in the urban area, because by 2050 the population projections are going to be India 1.6 billion, and this urbanization level going from 31 to 50%. That means 800 million people will be living in urban India as compared to 378 million. So another urban India is going to be added. So I think India needs to look at the priority, whether we are going to promote urbanization or we are also looking at the rural area. In fact, most of the urban problems have their genesis in the neglect of the rural area. So developing
True.
country like us, for the city to be more livable, more sustainable, more affordable, I think we will have to relook at our option and redefine our strategy for looking at the rural area, so that people don't migrate and don't do this. So there are a whole lot of issues were there, and that's what we were talking, that the way we are constructing the housing, that is not going to solve the problem. I think we should stop constructing the housing. We should start manufacturing the housing, so that we have, people come housing components being prepared in industry. They are just brought in and, just put on the site, so that the house gets prepared within 2 or 3 months. But there are housing itself remains a very complex issue, and they are basically looking at different kind of option. We are basically well off in the MIG and HI category, but we are very bad in LIG and EWS category. So that's what, I think we will have to reinvent ourselves. Architects have to do their job more thoroughly, because the designing EWS housing is the most challenging job here. The way Chandigarh has run, I have put in my, that book in Chandigarh, a Chandigarh experiment with low cost housing, what they did in 48, or 50, the Piri Janre, etc. This is wonderful, the way they have, reduced the cost without compromising with the quality of structure, architecture, and living, etc. Any question?
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. I think we'll come back for questions after the second panelist. If that's okay with the audience, can we go? We'll go ahead with Apurva now, and then together we'll ask them questions after she does her presentation. So I would like now to introduce our second panelist, Ms. Apurva Bose Datta. She is an author, award-winning architectural journalist, curator, and editor based in Bangalore. Her professional journey has seen global collaborations, and in her journey of 15 years, she has been persistently taking initiatives to increase the visibility of architecture design writing in India. Over the past 6 months, she has also been engaged with conceptualizing, curating, mentoring, and conducting a certified online course on architectural writings in architecture. Apurva has been invited by the Australian and Finland governments to represent the Indian delegation in international media visits of architectural writers. And about her book today, which she'll be talking, Architectural Voices of India, a blend of contemporary and traditional ethos, published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing UK, The book brings out the voices of 19 illustrious architects from India across generations, conversing through dialogues about the core issues and perspectives around architecture. And the book was published in 2017, and it has takeaways for all generations of readers and highlights the responsibility of architectural conversation and discourse, and talks about architecture being an integral part of building a nation. The book has been well received and has garnered wide coverage in media globally. So, Apurva, over to you. Just two questions for you with your presentation. That what are the learnings from the book for students and architects, if you would highlight that? And the other question we'll ask you after you finish your presentation. Over to
Sure.
you.
Thanks, Deepika. Very good evening to all of you. And Deepika, I must thank you for the invite. It is a pleasure being here on this platform talking about books in architecture, which is a topic which is rarely discussed in the architectural circles in India. When we talk about architectural books, we talk about writing in architecture and we talk about reading in architecture. And unfortunately, both disciplines are still in the process of establishing their relevance in the core curriculum, training, and even practice of architecture in India. I emphasize the Indian context here because in the global context, this hasn't been a problem as obvious as it has been in India. I have spent the 15 years of my career not only treading on the path of architectural writing, but also trying to raise the awareness of integrating the disciplines of architecture and writing. And that is why I'm extremely delighted that we are here today talking about books in architecture, which I believe in many ways is the most profound implementation of architectural writing. Additionally, I have to share that for me, sharing this platform with Professor Jeet Gupta is a huge privilege. As Gupta sir said, he was my professor in Chandigarh College of Architecture during my undergrad years. And Jeet sir, I will never agree to the fact that you said that you were, you were very bad at teaching. I will never agree to that. But I must say that, it's been 15 years since I graduated, but the way Jitsa has shown his support, encouragement, guidance for my work in these years has been nothing short of a blessing for me. Apart from learning from his exhaustive knowledge, experience, and expertise in the field, which his presentation also really amplified, I have always been most touched by the humility he has always had to. And so I would like to extend my gratitude to him for his architectural voices of India, which I'm going to be speaking on today. I have a very short presentation, a comparatively shorter presentation. It's going to be just a 10 or 12-minute presentation. So I'm just going to share my slides here. So, Deepika, I do hope my slides are visible.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I do believe that we are all students for life, and at any stage of profession we might be in, we shouldn't stop learning. We are all blessed to be in a country that has produced some of the most legendary, experienced, and innovative architectural minds who have not only mentored Indian architecture but have shown the younger generation of architects, including me, a path on which architecture should be treading along. These minds could be of practicing architects, academics, or all those who have contributed to architecture in their distinctive ways. Somewhere for me, it was this desire to learn, to understand, analyze, and implement the learnings, journeys, and voices of Indian architecture that led me to write Architectural Voices of India. It in fact gives me a great high to speak about this about this book on a day as special as today, where we get a chance to reflect more on how proud we are of this nation and what it means to us and what it offers to us. During the course of my profession of architecture writing, which enabled me to interact with scores of industry people worldwide, I wondered and questioned what was getting more importance. Was it the built environment, or was it the thoughts, perspectives, and the visions of those who built it? While the built environment got its share of limelight with the focus invariably being on buildings, somewhere the latter, who were a part of the building process, right from the masons to the architects, and then to a lot of other professionals who came along the way, didn't get that much of relevance. And even if they did, there wasn't a common platform in the print media where they could come together, assume the role of philosophers and literary giants, and talk about architecture and their own career paths. Architecture is not only about the final building, it is about the process and journey, about the minds and hands that conceptualize it and make it. In the past 1 year, though digital technology has connected all of us, and we have been fortunate to hear and document the thoughts, perspectives of architects across the world just sitting at home. However, this book was written at a time up till when the focus, especially in India, had been on what architects had created, not on what they thought. There were not many books on Indian architects. I am sure if I have to quote a percentage, 95% of architects in India do not write, either about themselves or on architecture and design. And the few books that we have on Indian architects, they focus on their projects and never on their theories and views. And that made me realize that there was a need for this kind of a book that I was contemplating. This is the book cover, and the theme of the book extends to the cover. The birds and their nests have been used as a metaphor to depict architects and man-made architecture and buildings. Birds, I believe, are one of the most skilled species at building dwellings and are the most natural architects on this earth. They built their nests out of nature using different materials such as mud, twigs, leaves, volcanic sand, etc. These dwellings are created to adapt to the surroundings in the most effective and efficient manner. Even by creating and living in different kinds of abodes, these diverse species of birds, adults as well as fledglings, communicate within themselves, live in harmony, and seamlessly blend into the changing environment. And that is exactly what architects also convey. They come with diverse styles, theories, and opinions on the handling of core issues of architecture, but an underlying thread binds them together. And that is to firstly design a built environment that fulfills its most basic expectation of offering a safe, functional, and livable space to its users. And secondly, to fulfill their core responsibility, which is to be not only environment builders, but to assume roles of being society builders, city builders, and nation builders too. There are 19 illustrious Indian architects across 17 architecture practices who are a part of this book. There was an effort to include architects across generations, different geographical locations in India, different specializations, excelling in varied building genres, architects who come with diverse theories and perspectives. And if I may say, style in architecture. Each chapter has a brief but comprehensive profile of the architect that sums up their journey in architecture. This is then followed with an in-depth conversation with them. While to some extent it is also about individuals in this book, but I followed a certain structure in these conversations which binds all the architects and gives a framework in which architecture as a subject and as a profession can be discussed. The questions that were relevant to the experience and expertise were posed to each architect, but these questions were all grouped under subheads that were common to all the chapters. So you can see the subheads on the screen. There were career paths and journeys, architecture in India, global architecture, architectural education, architecture in changing times, building with emotions, and the way forward. Under these subheads, there are various issues and challenges that have been discussed. There are then two small sections spent by the architects in each chapter, one that revolves around their personal, family, or office spaces, and one that goes into a little more detail about one of the projects that symbolizes the ethos of architecture for them. Here are all the 19 architects who are a part of this book, and you can see the titles of their respective chapters in the book. And I made an effort that each title could be symbolic of the architect's design philosophy. The book, in many ways, celebrates the spirit of each individual architect with his or her distinctive journey, his work, and his opinions. The book also reflects how architects, irrespective of diverse age groups, philosophies, theories, and specializations, have a common aim to build for a better society. A very well-known architecture critic from the US once told me that Indian architects are amongst the world's best kept secrets. And I sincerely hope that this book could be a step to break that mystery around them. What I really enjoyed during my interactions with all these architects was the fact that there was no mincing of words. To the extent that many admitted that there is a dire need for the architecture fraternity to stand up and assume their responsibilities, which are not for the clients only, but for the society and the nation as a whole. As one reads through these interactions, one realizes that there is diversity of thoughts, but there is consensus too. There is a passion to build and to make architecture into a profession that can affect the way a society develops. The diverse voices of these architects help to build and initiate discourses. The book has a lot of hard-hitting quotes which compel us to think, contemplate, and act. I am sharing a few of them here. And Deepika, since you specially said that what are the specific learnings in the book for architectural students, I think all the statements and all these views that have been shared are a learning in itself. I do believe that this book is all about learning from the unique journeys of these architects, learning from their passion to build, from their diverse perspectives and visions of architecture, and further analyzing and implementing this learning. The book further celebrates the plurality of thoughts. It teaches us that we all can have diverse perspectives and journeys, and all is good till we are focused on working towards our common destination. All the thoughts of these architects have been summarized and further analyzed by me in the book's concluding chapter called Reflections and Realizations. Here are some visual representations from the book. As you would see, besides the primary focus being on text, the book is well illustrated. I was quite keen on having handmade sketches and technical drawings of the architect's seminal projects other than images, because I believe that an architectural book or a magazine should be a good balance between all these elements. As shared, the book also gives a sneak peek into the architect's personal spaces, about their families, work environment, and office spaces. And through this section, it makes us connect to these creators in a more intrinsic manner, because we do realize at the end of the day that they also live a life as we all do, and it just makes us appreciate them all the more. While on the one hand, Architectural Voices of India helps us understand the individual thought processes of a few from the architectural fraternity, it also highlights their very solid unity, which is visible in the passion with which they build, or the dream potential or hope that they see in architecture, especially in India. The book traces the trajectory of Indian architecture in modern times and helps us also realize that we are all a self-aware community. The book talks about architecture being an integral part of building a nation's, and architects, planners, and designers contributing the most towards it. And finally, it motivates us to become architectural voices of the country, which can be noticed and which can make a difference. Any talk on this book of mine will be incomplete if I don't mention immense gratitude to firstly the 19 architects who shared their time and extended complete support for the book to take its shape. They didn't have to do it because I was a debutant author, but the amount of time and efforts, apart from the support that they extended and their belief in me and my work, gave me so much of motivation. I have to make a special mention of Ravindra Bhan sir and Nimish Patel sir. When I heard about their demise, I couldn't stop realizing how blessed I was to have interacted with them during my lifetime and to have got the opportunity to document their voices for this publication, which would stay on forever. I can't definitely fall short of thanking them for the constant support they gave me. Apart from the featured architects, the architectural fraternity was so supportive and encouraging. I might have been 12 years into architectural writing when this book was launched, but when one authors a book for the first time, and that too through traditional publishing, one has no clue about how daunting it can be to work on it all, and that too independently. And that's why, for me, it was overwhelming to see the extensive support that I received from the fraternity from all quarters. Writing the book and the learnings that came with it have been a lifetime experience, something that I will hold close to my heart forever. So thank you, Deepika. I must thank you for specially giving me this opportunity to go back in time, relive the journey, and share it with you and all our viewers too. And because especially you mentioned that, I should be probably focusing on that, how is it a learning for students? Before I focus on the learning for students, I can say that one of the biggest takeaways for me from this book has been the learning that humility is the biggest virtue, and it is an integral part of how successful one is, something that each of these 19 architects greatly exhibited. There are, in fact, a few Guru Shishya Jodis, if I may say, in the book, and to see the kind of mutual respect and the admiration they have for each other was inspiration. They talk about collaborations, they talk about teamwork, which we all have to learn from. And yes, I will make a special mention that this book does hold a lot of value for students, because I have seen a lot of universities globally too have the book in their libraries for the students. I also want it to be a resource book on the architects and architecture in India that can inspire students. So firstly, I think it is the journey of these architects which convey the grit, determination, and perseverance that one needs to pursue in a field like architecture. All these architects and many other who are not a part of the book have had journeys which have been very challenging. But I think there has always been the belief in themselves and their work which has given them their resounding success. I should also say that, the connection with architecture for most of these architects happened in many ways. For example, Hafiz Contractor, he wanted to join the army, whereas Professor Benninger, he firmed up on joining architecture when he was just 14. Architect Kamal Malik was studying engineering till one fine day when he realized that, he doesn't want to do engineering, he wants to become an architect. Architect Premnath was a blueprint boy in an architectural office from where he developed a passion for architecture. So I think it's very important for students to realize that there is no fixed time when someone realizes their passion for a profession. It can happen at any time, and it is important to listen to your calling at that time and take appropriate steps. Secondly, I think one of the major learnings for the students would be that hard work can never be ignored. I remember Ravindra Bhansa mentioning to me in the book that he would perform at a local cafe to earn money when he was studying at the University of Pennsylvania. In fact, in case of architect Sanjay Puri, today he has put India on the world map. But I don't know how many of us know that he actually commenced his training in architecture immediately after finishing his class 12th board exams. And this was actually 3 months before he even appeared for an interview at the Academy of Architecture to pursue his BR. Or for example, someone like S.T. Sharma sir, who is a part of the book, he is in his 80s. He is continuously working even today with much more enthusiasm. He says in the book that an architect never retires because creativity is unending. So I think these are some kind of learnings from their journeys that are very, very important. And there are some anecdotes and there are some statements which are very, very thought provoking. And I am sure that not only for students, but also for practicing architects, it will be of value, because there are a lot of topics that have been discussed in the book, right from, talking about environment to local materials to technology to issues like global warming, shortage of land, depletion depleting resources and poor infrastructure, then architectural education, making architecture a social movement. So when I was doing the book, I tried to kind of see the breadth and length of issues that architecture and design is facing, and I tried to weave them into a narrative into the book. And I must also here say that I didn't plan it as a book only for the students or for the architecture fraternity. I do feel that the book is important for general readers, because if we are trying to make architecture a profession that is not anymore elitist, and the public should know what architecture is, then I think this book could be a great way for the public to get to know about their architects and what they think. So, well, Deepika, that's, I think, probably in brief, I would want to say that that was my aim. And if you have any further questions, I'll definitely try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Apurva. That was really nice to go through your journey and the way you have presented about your book. I'm sure it'll motivate and inspire many architects and non-architects as well, as you said, rightly said. So we'll open it to the floor for questions, and please, you may go ahead with your questions, Mr. Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Deepika, I am Anant Ramu. I was formerly chief architect at ISRO, Bangalore. So I worked for 40 years in Bangalore, and I had the privilege to work under Mr. S.D. Sharma, who was the first chief architect of ISRO. My passion, I teach architecture and architectural photography. Photography is my passion, and I teach these things today. Now I have two questions for Professor Gupta, one, and Deepika. Professor Gupta, this satellite towns, in case if for the Chandigarh, while doing the Chandigarh planning, if they had planned for some satellite towns, the growth of the Chandigarh could have been much better to avoid all this unplanned growth and slums. So why the satellite towns were not made? That was a question for Professor Gupta. And then I will come back to Deepika.
In fact, when Corbusier was shown that concept of satellite towns, he just said nothing doing, city will be a finite city and city will be contained with the periphery. But unfortunately, I would call Chandigarh a city of crisis, It was conceived in crisis, born in crisis, grown in crisis, continues to be in crisis. Unfortunately, this city suffered the worst kind of, hit, I would say, in 1966. Because in 1966, Punjab was bifurcated. Haryana being created with Hindi-speaking area and Himachal getting all the hill area. So Chandigarh became a bone of contention between Haryana and Punjab. So when it was thought of, because this was division on linguistic basis, so Chandigarh was to go to, most of the people said Hindi speaking, will not give to Haryana for 15 or 20 years, will keep it as a union territory. So Chandigarh became a union territory in 1966 and the capital of both the states. So this is now three administrative things. What happened, when they divided the states, what they did, they divided the periphery also. So 16 kilometer of periphery, which was 1450 square kilometer. So I said 72% went to Punjab, 75% went to Punjab, 72%, 22% went to Haryana. And Chandigarh was only left with 114 square kilometer of area, which was the original area selected for setting up this. That was where the fallacy is there. So Chandigarh, Haryana states right where the boundary of Chandigarh ends, Punjab starts just in continuity of Chandigarh. So ultimately what happened, both these states, they were, having no power, no authority, no power to allocate anything. So they started searching, where do we go? So Haryana, right on the border, set up a town called Panchkula, Punjab set up a town of, this Mohali. So now, can you believe, this is not an unplanned destruction, this is a planned destruction, I call it, Now now Chandigarh is 129 sector, from 48 sector, they are now, Punjab has added, which is just an extension of Chandigarh, and they have 81 more sector. On other hand, Haryana has, set up a new town, which is another about 6 to 7 lakh scare population, So it is a crisis, basically it is only the town planners of these respective state where they said you make best of the, advantage of infrastructure given Chandigarh and have a next door development so that they cash on this. So ultimately now there is no question of any satellite town because Chandigarh is now a tri-city, which Haryana, Punjab, and I can say, next 30, 40 years, Chandigarh is going to be the biggest agglomeration north of Delhi. And it will have not less than population of 50 to 60 lakhs, to the extent the way this has been planned. So it is what unfortunately is the political system which have done this damage.
Thank you, Professor Gupta sir. Thank you very much. Now my next is for Apurva. First, let me thank Apurva for inviting me for this today's event. Now I am speaking from USA. She had told that this particular time at 5:30 in India time it will be. So now regarding this book, what you have written, you made an excellent presentation, Apurva. I think we have to, since I already invited you also to come and give talks in various colleges, this should be further enlightened and taken up at the student level in various colleges. That's only this point. You made an excellent effort. Yeah.
Thank you, Ananta sir, and I must really thank you because you are in the US, and I am sure it's not a very comfortable timings for you. But you said that you would attend it, so
Yeah.
thank you so much, and thank you so much for your compliments and encouragement for the book.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Gupta, and thank you, Apurva. Just two questions, one for each of you. Mr. Gupta, like you mentioned, rightly mentioned the ownership in housing for all that. Did you specifically study any examples of success or failures in whatever has been done in cities like Delhi, for example?
In fact, I only did this study. These are more, these policy-like program, articles which touched the various aspects of the city. In fact, I was trying to illustrate the example of Chandigarh. That book contains Chandigarh experiment with low-cost housing. So the kind of things which we are now looking at, that I think should need to be replicated so that you have a, quality housing at an affordable cost. But nevertheless, what I have seen is the cities are not inclusive. City don't believe in inclusion, they believe in exclusion. The larger the city doesn't accept people. They try to push it, on the fringe of the cities, or they will ask them to live in the most inhospitable kind of condition, or the areas which are totally derelict where nobody will go, and so therefore I find the way we are going looking at the housing, we look at basically an investment. Let me also explain to you, India has only 2.4% of the land, and we have 17.7% of the population to handle. India is already in a very, very bad condition so far land-man ratio is concerned. Can you believe it? 2.54% of land and 17.7% of the population, and everything happens on land for feeding everything, and for all your housing, for all your development, etc. You require a land. You can't go up there, till you have technology to make cities anywhere else, So I think if the question remains, it is not. We think housing as an investment, So you have houses, 7 houses, 6 houses. People have large, areas under the housing. But I think we have to learn. I am firm believer. India will have to, nationalize the land. Land has to be not traded like a commodity. And you find, earlier it was 80% cost of construction and 20% cost of land. Now what is happening, it's more than 90% cost of land and then only 10% cost of housing. So therefore, unless you have, land available, and land itself is an issue. I said 2.4 and 17. We are not realizing there the gravity of this. Ultimately, when the population grows, we will find we'll be in a mess. So therefore, I would wish, that we have to look at holistically as the housing as an issue. I said, let's not create, we accept the ownership, housing as a basic, shelter as a basic right, but not ownership of the housing as lead to a lot of complication, and that's going to be there. And secondly, we have to understand that where do as a nation we understand stand, will we allow people to have 4 houses, 5 houses? People are now having houses all in hill areas because rich people have money. They want to spend there some time. Can you believe it? On one hand, you have a shortage of housing. On other hand, about in Delhi, in Bombay, etc., every 6th house is lying vacant for the simple reason the laws are so bad because you don't want to rent it out. The moment you rent it out, that the house is simply gone because you are only collecting the rent. So there are tragedy, if you look at that, there are housing lying vacant. These are census figure, and there are people who are sleeping on the, you know, the footpaths, etc. Unfortunately, we as an architect, we don't think, there's a, message written. The tragedy of India is people are sleeping on footpaths, whereas typewriters are in the air-conditioned rooms. In the night, what is happening? And all the time, we have doing what? We have huge school. But when we come, that you have a high school for 15,000 people. And we need this area. So there are 30,000 people have 2 schools. Why can't a school be used for 2 shifts? Morning and evening? Why you need 2 schools? The same school. India needs to work on a knowledge of 24/7. Using land and resources what we have. If these are areas where the schools are there in the night, why people can't come and sleep? Why they should sleep on the footpath? I think these are the issue which we have to look at as a nation. We can't afford, that go on creating housing and go on creating the, ownership of the housing and investment. I think they are larger issue which needs to be looked at.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that was great. And it is being done. So I've seen examples in Delhi where, like you said, that not inclusive, but exclusive. And all that housing, as you said, that because of ownership was resold and it's all lying vacant. So over to you, Apurva. Very quick question that amongst all these architects, did you find any common thread that besides the hard work and passion which they share? I'm sure that is true with any profession, but specifically for architects, it needs a lot of hard work and perseverance to see your project, up on the ground. But anything else which you may have found in their ideology or any architectural style? Is there anything common between all of them?
There are a few things, and I think it might be might not be complete for me to talk about their voices in terms of their built work, because the kind of discussions that have happened in the book, the kind of statements that the architects have shared, I think weave a much larger narrative. So the book might be biographical in some way, but that's just a part of it. But yes, I could say a few things. For example, I realized that for all of them, architecture is much more than just a profession. It has been perceived as a way, as an expression or celebration of life. I remember Doshi sir said that. Professor Benninger said that it is a medium for attaining nirvana. And then someone spoke about architecture as a collective memory or about reconnecting. And I remember S.D. Sharma sir said that architecture is about more about an attitude rather than an aptitude. So I think the definition of architecture, it's not just a vocation. It goes much beyond the definition of a mere profession. And they also had a lot of common ideas when it came to the state of architecture in India, because I think there is that evident dislike to the fuss around foreign architects in India or undermining our own talent. Jeet sir gave us a very, very detailed overview of of Chandigarh through the book. And Chandigarh was actually considered as the laboratory for all these architects, from where everyone wants to learn for. But the fact of the matter is that Jeet sir also very rightly put that Chandigarh itself in a state of dilemma. So that is also something which was shared by the architects. There was also another section where we were talking about global inspiration, and for them, I think the common names that came up were I think there was Japan, there was Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. All countries which have a very strong history and culture. But I think they were very upfront on the fact that this addiction to the West may not be healthy. For example, I have architects like Sandeep Khosla and Manit and Sonali Rastogi who they did their postgrad overseas and then they were working there, but they felt that India was celebrating a shift in its design thinking, and they felt that we should go back to India because this is the time when we can offer a lot to the country. So I think that's also one thread that I could find through them. And obviously on architectural education, I think we are all on the same page. Everyone's eyes have been on the Council of Architecture, and but there was some kind of while there were some architects who believe that the younger generation is ahead of the older
I am in a
generations
Zoom meeting. I'll call back later on, please.
and have ample opportunities. There were few architects who felt that the younger generation lacks proper guidance. They're inclined towards commercialization. And I also felt that all the architects felt that there was a need for a very, very responsible media, which can take architecture to the masses, which can increase the awareness of design in general. I remember this particular statement that Hafiz sir makes in the book that for Indian architects to get recognition globally will take a lot of time, because only doing good work is not enough to get global recognition. It has to be conveyed, and that has to be conveyed to through the media. And unfortunately, Indian media is not kind of doing that much in terms of talking architecture or talking architecture to the masses. But I've also realized that we have had changing times. We have had architects across 3 generations, but all these architects with time, they kind of learned to adapt, whether it was to technology, whether digital or construction, or to well-traveled clients, because today clients are more well-traveled. They are more assured of what they kind of expect from the architecture. And a lot of these architects, they started from the traditional vocabulary of brick, mud, bamboo, stones, but today, even if they have to adapt to the newer materials, that is something also that they are doing. And I, in fact, in my preface, I call these architects catalysts or missionaries, because probably they all come with a well-defined mission, and they are very, very aware of that mission. And that's why I said that we are a self-aware community, because these architects felt that they should be leading the way. They felt that there should be an active collaboration between the fraternity, government, and policymakers. And they also felt that architects and planners should kind of work with the society and consider making it an active stakeholder in community-based projects. So while there were diversity of thoughts, but I think these were these were a few important threads that kind of went through all the chapters. And I must say that one important thing about communication, all these architects had great communication skills, and I emphasize on that because it is something of great importance to me, because I have been advocating the need of communications as an integral part of architecture. So, well, I think these are some of the important things that I found common in all the architects. Apart from the fact that I also felt that there were three things that they all had to go on the path and become so successful. One was, I think, passion towards what they were doing, and second was hard work, and thirdly, to do something different from the ordinary and visualizing things very differently. And I would say that they have traversed paths where their journeys have been more important than the destination. I think that's also a great takeaway that we need to take, that the journeys are always more important, than the product or than the destination. In fact, architecture also, in case of the process of building also, the process of building should be more important, or should teach us more about how it is to work with different things than only waiting for how the final product turns up. So yes, I am sure there are a lot more thoughts, a lot more statements that that teach us a lot from this book, but a few that I could probably recall now.
Thank you, Apurva. I think that summed up very nicely about the thoughts, and inherently, I would say that each architect has that. They need to have that passion, and the process, of course, is very important because it's the process which defines the end product as an architect. Because in the process, if your detailing is right and your choice of materials is right, is only then when you realize your ultimate project or a building, that's how its success is determined, I would say. So the process is equally important. So I think we'll conclude this wonderful interaction with both of you. And to sum it up for the audience, I would say that we've learned so much from Mr. Gupta about the Chandigarh plan of two cities, where you've acknowledged the team who was, I wouldn't say behind the scenes, but yes, the basis on which Chandigarh was built. And Apurva, for you, that how important architecture and architects are and what important role they play in building a nation. So I think our profession is one of the most important professions, I would say, being an architect. So how we shape everything, because actually it's a big subject that, your reactions, human reactions, are based on the built environment. So that's where our importance is, that how the responsibility lies on an architect. So thank you very much. It was wonderful having you all, and the initial technical hitches, but we kind of sailed through that. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
stay
Thank you,
tuned.
Deepika.
And next week, again, we'll come up with a new subject, same day, same time.
Thanks,
Stay-
Ms.
Thank
Deepika,
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank
wonderful
you.
presentation.
Thank you,
Thank
Deepika.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Purva. It was nice, It was very
Same here.
educative.
Same here. Such a pleasure for me too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
My 4 books are on this portal of the Indian Institute of Architects. So
Okay.
that book they can be freely downloaded. So
Okay.
that have been put as PDF. They can be accessed. One is on housing, one is on this heritage, one is on planning and designing of the state of art healthcare facilities, and one is of course housing. Four books are already there, and 2 more will go on architectural education, and last is making cities a great place to live in. So they can be accessed from the II website also. They are on there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So we'll share the recording, and this is live, so one can watch anytime. You can share the link with all your network. Thank you.
Thank you for
Okay.
the opportunity, and
Thank
it
you.
was nice,
Thank
Great learning.